Indie Business Radio for Monday, June 16th, 2008. I'm your host, Donna Maria, and you have arrived at the one place where we empower you to enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way. Today's show is sponsored by Essential Wholesale, offering one of the largest selections of natural and organic unscented cosmetic spaces in the world. Try their new label product selector, where you can order as few as 7 units of product customized and labeled just for you. Perfect for companies just starting out and people making products to give away as wedding gifts, baby shower gifts, and all kinds of other applications. Visit essentialwholesale.com for more details. Well, I recently read a study that said that 40% of Americans surveyed said that they had not saved enough for retirement. I also took some finance classes last year, and the instructor shared statistics indicating that Americans saved less than any other country on earth, considering our means. Can we continue to live under this kind of stress? Life expectancy in the U.S. has been steadily increasing, but the wages of the average American has not kept up with their increased time here on earth, and that's what we are in business to tell the world about, the benefits of having your own income right here at Indie Business Radio, how to create income on your own terms, and we encourage everyone to have a business of their own so they can do that. But while you're at it, we don't want you to overlook, while you're tending to profits and making sure that you're twirling all the other balls in the air that you've got to keep up there, don't forget about saving, investing in yourself, paying yourself first. And today, to talk about stress-free retirement planning and why there is such a thing, we've got an expert on the topic. Jeffery Wuorio is a nationally recognized finance author and columnist. He's the author of several books, one of the most recent of which is called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Retirement Planning. Start now to have the retirement lifestyle that you want. Jeff has written about real estate and other financial topics for magazines like Money Magazine, Fortune Small Business, Consumer Reports, and others, and he also works as a columnist for the Microsoft Small Business Center. Jeff, welcome to Indie Business Radio.
Donna Marie, thank you so much for having me.
We'll take your comments and questions today. Do join us, 800-773-0355, or you can email your question to info@indiebusinessradio.com. Well, Jeff, you've got a very interesting financial background, but tell us a little bit about how you got into this kind of industry, having your own business, providing these kinds of books and consulting services. At some point, you had like a traditional job, right?
Oh, yeah, quite some time ago. My initial background was I was a modern American literature major in college, which, as we know, means you can be really, coherent and lucid in the unemployment line for the most part. And after that, I worked for a number of daily newspapers in the Northeast and in the Pacific Northwest. And roughly 22 years ago, I decided that I really wasn't cut out for the 9-to-5, go to work, come home sort of environment, and I began freelancing on my own and ultimately went to the point where I was doing enough and making enough where I could go out, exclusively on my own and freelance articles, work with companies, and, write books on various topics that had either a small business or personal finance relationship. And I've been there for about 22, going on 23 years now.
And, Jeff, did you have the traditional job for a while at the same time that you were doing this freelance work? In other words, how long was your transition before you left the traditional world 100%?
It was about 2 years. It segued gradually because, like so many people, I didn't want to, cut my lines completely if indeed the freelancing didn't pan out. So I worked it carefully where bit by bit I kept adding freelance work, making better contacts, networking more effectively, to the point where it actually got to the point where I was still holding down a 40-hour-a-week business reporting job and freelancing fairly extensively on the side. So it was actually a dynamic of this complete overload of work to the point where I had confidence to go fully on my own. But it was about a 2-year process, all things considered.
Right. It sounds like towards the end there, you just needed to get some sleep.
Well, it was either one or the other, because both had reached that critical mass to the point where they both couldn't continue to coexist at the level at which they were at.
Right. Well, so many of our listeners are in that transitional period, so thank you for sharing a little bit about your experiences. Jeff, you've been involved, as you say, in this financial planning, retirement finance industry for such a long time. Tell us, how did this retirement planning book come about? There's so many retirement planning books out there. Why this one? What makes this one unique?
Well, the one thing that we really wanted to bring out in this particular book is, first of all, the dynamics of retirement are changing so drastically and so constantly that it almost mandates new coverage unto itself. What was applicable a year ago may be wholly out of date now in some subject areas. So that unto itself made a new approach to retirement, very, very important. But also, we wanted to have a workbook feel in terms of a logical and systematic progression from topic to topic that would take the reader through in a sensible, almost chronological order. What would you need to consider first? What would you need to consider next? Actionable, takeaway, and proactive steps along the way, so that over time, not only would the reader gain an overall global sense of what retirement was about and what it was necessary, he or she would gain that in a sensible context and in a sensible order so that it all made sense in the end, as opposed to jumping around from one topic to the next, and also with a workbook format where you can really sit down and take these strategies and take the advice and apply them in your own situation so you have a real sense of how it works for you.
And the first chapter in your book, Jeff, just covers the topic of all the changes that you're mentioning about how the word retirement has a totally different connotation than it used to. What is a definition of retirement that makes some sense on June 16th, 2008?
Well, it's a great question, because in researching the topic of retirement, when we go back to our grandparents and great-grandparents, the concept for the vast majority of people throughout the world, Americans included, the idea of retirement was wholly unknown, because, again, with life expectancy only at a certain age, much less than it is now, it was kind of a working given that you were going to work until the day they lowered you into the ground. So the idea of finishing work and taking time to do other things for the remainder of your life was wholly foreign. And as it evolved to the point where you allowed through corporate sponsorship, where you could retire at age 65 and you have this time to yourself, then it was largely the fact of corporate sponsorship of pensions and other sorts of retirement plans that were workplace-based that were the major funding source for a lot of people's retirements. The idea of you having to save for your retirement as such was still fairly unknown. It was sort of like you worked for the same company for 40, 50 years, and when the time came for you to retire, they would be taking care of you. And now in the last 10 or 15 years, with a lot of company pensions and other programs such as that waning or becoming more optional or having a lot of other kinds of differences that were not in place 10 or 20 years prior to that, it really has shifted to the individual in terms of, yes, it really is up to you to plan and execute a retirement program, particularly if you're a small business owner or an independent business owner, because, again, it's wholly on your shoulders. So it's really kind of evolved from never being there at all to being sort of this big brother sort of function where the company took care of you, to the point where now your retirement is, it is your definition and it is your execution. And for a lot of people, the idea of retirement has changed drastically as well. The old stereotype of playing golf 6 days a week and having grandchildren on your knees, is about as out of date as rumble seats and coonskin caps, because people are starting businesses, people are traveling more, people are volunteering more, people are going into alternate living arrangements other than a conventional single-family home. So everything is in flux. So if you boiling it down to a definition of retirement is pretty much what you define it, because it's wholly up to you as to what you want to make of it, how you want to live, and how you want to get there.
Yeah, it's more like, what are you going to do at this stage in your life? Where are you going to bloom for the next 10 years, and then you may need to change it after that. It's kind of interesting. It's just like, what are you doing now? How has your business, what direction has your business taken you in? So, Jeff, it almost sounds to me like the word retirement will at some point be maybe even written out of the dictionary. Some other term, it seems to me, may one day take its place. But anyway, I want to ask you about, for those people for whom the term is still relevant, because for example, I have a friend who just emailed me yesterday and said that she was taking an early retirement package from a newspaper of all places, and we won't go into why that's happening, but she's taking an early retirement from a newspaper. It's very interesting because she's been a copy editor for many years. She's a very talented writer. And she's very, she's got a psychology degree and human behavior background, doesn't have a business of her own, and emailed me just yesterday to say, I'm remembering all those conversations we used to have, 5 or 6 years ago about you sharing, get a website, start doing something to share your expertise so that when the time comes, or if it comes, that you have the option to move on. And now she's at the stage where she kind of has to do that. But my question, based on that kind of background, Jeff, is what do people in her position consider when they're, looking at, okay, I'm going to take an early retirement package, have this job for 20 years. They're giving me, a nice chunk of change, but I do have to sell my house in a lousy real estate market and all that stuff. What are some of the things that people in that position can consider when they're, number one, thinking about starting a business, and number two, wanting to take advantage of some of this stress-free retirement planning that your book talks about?
Well, it's really, your friend's example is really interesting because, again, in researching this book, when they were talking with people about retirement per se and the concept and their understanding of it, what was really intriguing, amongst other things, was the finding that as opposed to a sort of turn down in one's activity level and a leaving of a job and a leaving of a form of life, if you will, the vast majority of retirement age people were looking at their retirement as the beginning of something new. And whether that was travel, whether that was starting a business, whether that was anything you can envision, they looked upon it as this new gateway as opposed to the end of something else. So your friend is really at an interesting and enviable stage of life in a lot of ways, because another finding that my book found was that as opposed to, again, years ago where you might have had 10 or 15 years in retirement, especially for early retirees now, it's not unusual for early retirees to actually spend more time in retirement, quote-unquote, than they did in their jobs, quote-unquote. So the whole balance of how you're spending the entire scope of your life has shifted very drastically. So in her case,
let's say you've decided what kind of business you want to go into, and you're kind of on your way with that. But, you're going to use some of your retirement savings, your 401k or whatever it was from your traditional job to fund the business. What are some of the things that you need to put in place in that business, if you can, from the very beginning to set
Square one.
The future?
Square one is the business plan. Okay. This is the benchmark for businesses, no matter if you're 21 or if you're 61.
And when you say business plan, Jeff, when you say business plan, are you talking about? Let's say someone needs to plan their business, but they're not interested in getting investors or a loan right now. Is there a different kind of business plan other than?
Well, there are certain elements that are common to all sorts of business plans that, no matter how involved or sophisticated or substantial your business might be, you really have to include. For instance, who are your customers going to be? You need to identify them. How are you going to market to them? How are you going to reach them? How are you going to appeal to them? How are you going to differentiate your business from competitors? What's your budget going to be like? Are you going to have employees? All these things, even if you're not looking for outside investment support or what have you, those are basic elements that any business plan has to include. And fortunately, now you can get software which is absolutely marvelous in terms of walking you through various steps. So they literally take you by the hand and say, okay, Donna Maria, you want to start this business. who's going to buy Donna Maria Products Inc.? How are you going to reach them? Are you going to use what sort of advertising? Are you going to, what sort of price structure are you going to have? All of these things it leads you through very comprehensively. But business plan in some form is an absolute must, because without it, you're swimming upstream with a lead weight tied to your feet, because you need to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. And without a business plan, that's a really difficult quandary to be in. Another step.
We're talking with Jeffery Wuorio, the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Retirement Planning. We've got to take our first break. We're going to come back, and Jeff is going to share with us, in addition to a business plan, a few other things that he feels are critical to getting a business up and running, and really not just for a potential retiree or someone who's approaching the early buyout like my friend is, but just for anyone. So we're going to take a short break and come right back. This is Indie Business Radio. Don't touch that mouse.
Why is everyone listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com? Because it's the future of talk radio. Every day, more and more people are finding Internet radio as not just an alternative media, but as a replacement to traditional AM and FM broadcast stations. Internet radio offers a wider variety of programs, convenient on-demand listening that meets your schedule, and fewer commercial interruptions. And GlobalTalkRadio.com is already leading the way by matching this content with a highly targeted Internet audience. GlobalTalkRadio.com offers its listeners one of the widest programming varieties on the Internet, from business and finance to self-improvement, paranormal, health, literature, romance, politics, and more. There are also opportunities for prospective hosts who would like to host their own weekly or one-time talk shows. Want to learn more? Check us out at www.globaltalkradio.com and see the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. We're talking with Jeff Wuorio, the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Retirement Planning. And Jeff, before we took our break, you were sharing a couple of things that everybody who starts a business needs to make sure they cover before they actually launch. One was drawing up a business plan, and I think you said there are two more.
Yes. The next one is simply enough, know where your source of funds are coming from. It's a chronic mistake for a lot of businesses to underestimate how much money they're going to need at the outset to see them through that year or two or three where, likely not a lot of income is going to be coming in, and hence you're going to need this money to see you through in terms of growth and development and paying the bills. So add up all your potential sources of funding. For a lot of businesses whom I profiled, they started with credit cards. Others would use a line of credit on their home or savings or some other source. You could even use money from, if you're coming from another conventional business setting, like a 401k or something like that, to borrow from that as well, too. But don't underestimate how much money you're going to need, because it's hard to really say what I'm going to need, this is going to be too much. It's really hard to say that. So err on the side of too much rather than not enough. And the last thing, which is really important, too, is that while however enthused and confident you may be about the business you may be starting in retirement, it's also critical to remain realistic and getting a sense of, the realistic sense that a lot of businesses fail for all sorts of reasons. So you really need to have a stopgap point at which point you're going to say, by my planning, we've reached the point where I'm just not comfortable in going any further. I'm putting too much of my financial safety on the line. I'm putting too much stress on myself. I'm putting too much stress on my family, various other problems. It's really reached that stopgap point at which I'm just going to fold everything and call it quits. Job well done. Didn't work out. But no, just don't keep staggering down that road, hoping against hope that, things are going to turn around. Know at what point, be it financial, be it psychological, be it whatever, when you're saying enough's enough, I need to fold this for the betterment of myself and my family.
And, well, that sounds so easy. How do you know when you've reached that point?
Good question. Because for some people, it's something you really have to do a good deal of soul searching with, or by the same token, talk with a friend or a colleague or a consultant and have them draw you out in terms of, okay, at what point are you going to say enough is enough? And really break it down very exhaustively. Is it going to be financial? Say, if I am $40,000 in debt, that's the point at which I'm going to say, okay, I've got enough to cover my bills and recover. I can't come back. Done is done. Mm-hmm. For some other people, saying, if I'm starting to have sleepless nights, or I'm snapping at my kids, or I'm working 80 hours a week and nothing seems to be coming of it,
right.
So it can be empirical, it can be subjective. Talk with friends, talk with spouses, talk with family members. They can often be very helpful in saying, I know you. Here's what I would suggest should be your stopgap point. So it's going to be different for everybody. And
so it is going to be different for everyone. It sounds so easy, but it sounds like it's a really critical part. And this plays into, actually, Jeff, you have to consider that, do you not, in conjunction with how you're going to actually plan financially to set aside money to take care of yourself as your life progresses.
Right. Again, too, there's another benchmark. Is this business compromising the financial security of your retirement? Mm-hmm. Are you drawing down funds faster than you expected? Again, that goes back to the business plan. If you set aside X amount of dollars per year and you're finding that you're 10 or 20% beyond that, that's a pretty telling barometer that things are not going the way they should, needless to say, and that it might at least be a point at which you would want to shut things down. But again, too, that's also a great benchmark. Am I compromising my retirement? Because granted, a business can be very compelling, can be passionate, very passionate sort of thing, but at the same time, don't put your retirement out on a limb, hoping against hope that you can turn around something that, over the long haul, isn't likely to work very well.
Well, don't try not to lose your objectivity.
Exactly. Business owners, as a rule, it's a sort of can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing. So wrapped up in it, so confident, so wholeheartedly involved in it, that it's often it's a hard nut to admit this isn't going to work, and you do have to be objective about it, or by the same token, turn to others who can be objective on your behalf, your accountant, your attorney, your bookkeeper, friends, families who will say, you may not see this, but we do. Mm-hmm. This is just not working, and it's causing financial and personal destruction. Turn to them and let them impress upon you that kind of objectivity.
And the things we've been talking about so far, Jeff, are, I guess, in practical terms, they may be difficult to implement because your emotions and your hopes and dreams are involved, but really they're not complicated. They're simple concepts. And your book talks about simple ways to, if you are in a position to, move your business forward and you are fortunate to have a business that's actually, moving in the right financial direction, tell us some of the simple things that you recommend that people who may be just wrapping their hands around this issue should look at in terms of investing for the future.
Sure. First of all, even though it's funny, I saw an ad last night that covered the topic of retirement, and again, the underlying theme was, you aren't finished, you're just getting started. So if you have a business in retirement, don't forget about continuing to fund your retirement as part of that business, be that through a 401k, simplified employee pension, things of that nature. But again, you look at it as a continuum rather than something that you're doing after the fact. So work with a financial planner to find the right retirement program for you. If you have one in place, continue to fund it. Don't look at it as something that's come to a screeching halt. It's something that you have to continue to work and massage and continue to grow as your business grows as well, too.
And the idea is to
I'm sorry, go ahead.
the idea, is it not, is to use your business to finance your future, essentially.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
It's about how much money I'm making, what's my, how much money am I making? It's very different from profit. And in addition to that, there's got to be enough available to actually fund your retirement or whatever you're going to call it.
Exactly. Unto itself, that can be the primary retirement vehicle. But again, it goes back to the business plan in terms of how you see the growth continuum of this business. Are you going to be able to realize in 10 or 15 years, sufficient income to continue your retirement in that fashion? And also, too, bearing in mind that 10 or 15 years from now, the business you start at age 55 may not be one that you want to continue past age 70. So, again, too, you have to look at change. You have to continue about how long you want to be involved in this. Are you going to sell it? Are you going to pass it along to a family member? Succession planning is another issue of go ahead.
Let's just say I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I know I want a business. I've got some money saved up to start it. I'm going to set up a business structure. What are some of the things that I should consider in terms of vehicles to funnel money, from my business account into some sort of retirement savings vehicle? What are some of the easier, things that people can start doing like today if they wanted to?
Well, there are a few things. You kind of touched on one that I routinely urge people to do, regardless of whether they're retirement or not, is to set up an automatic funding program for savings. One of the most powerful personal finance tools that exist is the automatic funding program, where you designate an account, designate where the money comes from, where it goes to, and how often you want, and how large a sum that you want. And by taking the personal choice out of the equation, that unto itself can be so powerful in terms of funding your savings for the future, savings if you wish to reinvest it in the business, that sort of thing. But putting it on autopilot is absolutely essential. A related topic, but one also, too, that I think is really, really important, is obtaining adequate disability coverage. Because particularly for people who are older and are in retirement, quote, unquote, again, we put those large quotation marks around that term, the prospect of becoming disabled in some manner and becoming unable to participate in the business becomes that much more possible than it was earlier in life. So the importance of disability coverage and obtaining adequate disability coverage, to meet your bills, to meet your other financial obligations if by chance you do become hurt and you can't continue to work in the business, is often overlooked. Disability insurance is one of those things that everyone somehow or another always has an excuse to bypass in some capacity, but don't overlook it as part of the overall financial picture for your protection of your business. Because if you get hurt and you are the key person in that business, everything comes to a screeching halt, and you need to have some financial stopgap in place to see you through until you are better and can rejoin the business. The third element to all this in terms of planning financially with a business in mind is investigating long-term care insurance. And it's funny because I remember reading an article about this in Consumer Reports a while back, and they said, long-term care insurance is a lousy deal, but it's the best deal we got, basically. And in terms of when you get to the point where you're going to need some form of care, be it assisted care, be it nursing home care, be it some kind of hospital, what have you, the price of all that is going up so drastically that the importance of obtaining long-term care insurance in some capacity is incredibly, incredibly important, because without it, even if you've had a flourishing business and have been saving very well, the costs of nursing home care, for instance, are so absolutely staggering, it can bring down a huge, savings amount or money set aside for retirement within a few years' time, depending on the level of care.
Yeah, I have heard that, Jeff. That what bankrupts people the most is trying to take care of them, just their health care.
Yeah, It's terrifying, especially if you get to the point where you're going to need fairly sophisticated, fairly involved care for whatever reason. And I believe I have some statistics in the book that give some average per day costs of various areas and cities around the United States. And suffice it to say, there isn't a cheap one in the bunch. And long-term care insurance, again, is expensive. A lot of people say, gee, I could spend that money better elsewhere, but getting some, at the very least, can help mitigate a cost and keep your nest egg much more intact than you might have a chance to do without it.
And Jeff, again, none of this stuff is complicated, but what can you say to people who, as you just said, are just like terrified? I mean, it's almost like, gee, I could go work for somebody else and be miserable but have health insurance. Or I could have my own and disability insurance and be able to put some money away, as you said, every week into a savings plan. I could have all the three things that you said if I have a full-time job.
Right.
But then,
right.
I'm totally miserable. I'm growling at my kids anyway because I hate being where I am for 10 hours a day and then in rush hour traffic for another 2 every day. So help us feel better. Can you do that?
I'll try.
No, what I'm thinking is, it sounds like it all goes back to what you said earlier about planning, and you took a 2-year transition period, so that was part of your plan.
Yes. The other thing, too, in terms of, depending on the age of the person who may be listening to this, is that one thing that really works in your favor is that it's never too early to start saving for your retirement. And I know way back in the day when I was 25 years old and I knew everything and I was going to live forever and never get sick and, all these wonderful things, the notion of saving for that distant, murky idea of retirement was so irrelevant to me that I would have laughed it off had it not been for some family members who were saying, look, you cannot start this too soon. So that's rule number one, is that no matter where you are, particularly if you're young, but no matter where you are in your life, it's never too early to get started saving. And the good news is, too, it doesn't take a lot to get started. If you save $50 a week, if you save $100 a week, whatever you can manage, whatever you can set aside, if you get a bonus at work, for instance, at the beginning, or you get if you have your own business and win a big contract and you get this windfall, set it aside for your retirement. It's going to come sooner than you think. And the sooner you can get started, the more manageable it becomes. So that's one way of kind of getting past that scary point of, oh my gosh, I'm going to need all this money for retirement and I don't know where it's going to come from. The same holds true. That's
a really good. We're going to have to take another break. I want you to hold that thought, if you would, because we all want to hear it. This is Indie Business Radio. We're talking with Jeff Wuorio, the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Retirement Planning. We'll be right back.
Want to stay on top of what's new in the radio industry? Sign up for a free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio, available exclusively to listeners of globaltalkradio.com, and find out what's new in the world of online radio. Listeners can find out about new shows and special guests. People with something special to offer can find out how to become a guest and how to prepare for an interview. And prospective hosts will find a valuable resource for everything from planning their new program to selecting topics and guests, recouping expenses by selling advertising, and more. Sign up today for your free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio by visiting www.globaltalkradio.com and learn about the future of talk radio today.
Business Radio. Donna Maria here, talking with Jeff Wuorio, author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Retirement Planning. Jeff, before our break, you were sharing one more thought about long-term care.
Yes. Another way to kind of mitigate the sting of all these horrible these impending expenses is to look into long-term health care at a fairly early age. Again, it may seem like the last thing you want to consider when you're 30-some years old or 35 or 25 or what have you, but the earlier you can get it, the easier it is to get, the easier the underwriting process is, and it's also a whole lot less expensive. And down the line, you'll be happy you have that in place. Thank you for sharing that. I think, where do we go to get this? Can we Google, long-term care? Yeah, you can do that. A lot of the major carriers have really excellent websites that have wonderful primers and tutorials that walk you through all the elements of long-term care insurance. What it is, what it covers, what it doesn't cover, things like that, and issues like that are really helpful. Another good source is AARP. They've got a great website, aarp.org, and they also, too, will walk you through a lot of the specifics involved in long-term care insurance. Again, what it is, what it doesn't, how to shop for the best deal, what you need, what you don't, all sorts of resources to help you walk through it. And my book, it also has a chapter or a portion of a chapter that deals with long-term care insurance, and that should also be helpful for folks to kind of get their feet wet on the topic. Right. I was going to mention that, too, that the book is a great resource. There's so much information, in search engines, and your book does a really nice job of kind of paring it down to a manageable amount of information that anybody can sit down and, pick a topic every week and just cover that, with a cup of tea and your pen and pencil so you can take your notes. And that's one of the really good things about the simplicity of this book. And speaking of which, Jeff, when we were preparing for today's show, you shared with me a sort of epiphany that you had in doing your research for this book. Tell our listeners what that is. Well, I don't know if this is going to evoke empathy or, my gosh, this is the guy who wrote a book on retirement, but here goes. I hope a lot of other authors have this sort of experience, but as I was going through it and researching various topics and finding out all these things that I frankly did not know about retirement, it was somewhat of an exercise in bringing to light to my attention all the things that I needed to address that I had not addressed before, in terms of my portfolio, in terms of my savings level, in terms of my insurance coverage, in terms of a lot of things about my business and protecting my family, and just a whole array of issues that, had I not been researching this book, the chances are pretty good that I might not have gotten to these topics at all, or at the very least would have gotten to them later than I did now. So in that regard, I'm very much in the boat of a lot of listeners, probably, because it's a topic that's, it's hard to keep current with, and a topic that's hard to be comprehensively, on top of. So that it happened to me. I hopefully learned from it, and it's an example that we can all find out more about our retirement and where we stand, and those things that we need to adjust and implement and change to really make it work out for the better. In that regard, I'm no different than anybody else who may be picking up the book and reading it. Well, and that, I think, for many people, that is a comfort to know that, even someone who's written a book about it, there's always more to learn and more to learn that you don't know. So, again, it's, let's not wring our hands. Let's just tackle this because it's really necessary. And, another thing that this sort of makes me think about, Jeff, is, as you're doing your business planning, as you're, setting aside this money and taking a look at all these savings options that you have, the cash has got to be free to invest. So, what does that say about, the situation of so many people in debt today? That is actually, that's a great issue and an essential topic to bring up, because if there's one element of our lives, be it small business owners, be it people hoping to be small business owners, be it people who are hoping to retire soon, is the level of debt that we're carrying. Because I've heard all sorts of statistics as to how large the average credit card debt is, and various other things such as that, and it's frightening. It is really frightening, the amount of debt that most Americans carry. It's in the tens, the 20s, the 30s thousands of dollars in credit cards, in, auto loans, in the loan for the big screen TV, the loan for, the new riding mower, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And taking that from another perspective, not only is that an obligation that you constantly need to address and try to pay down, or it's only going to grow with the interest rate, it also diverts funds that you could be using for something a whole lot more important than, paying your Visa bill or your MasterCard bill, and that's saving for your retirement. So, in that regard, not only is it important to save for retirement for small and independent business owners, if they are saddled with a great amount of debt, it is absolutely imperative to try to pay that down as much as possible, because it's just something that bleeds you very, very slowly, very inconspicuously, but over time, it can be an absolutely destructive element to your financial future. So
another reason to keep that job for a while, you can use that income not only to finance the business, but you can also use it to get rid of the debt before you actually transition to your full-time business.
Well, another way to look at it, too, is you are paying yourself if you are paying down debt. If you say, for instance, you've got $5,000 on a credit card bill that is charging 18%, which is not, anything outlandish by any stretch of the imagination these days, look at the fact that you've just got an 18% return on $1,000 that you've just paid off that debt. So in that regard, it is an obligation, yes, but it is also an investment in yourself by the fact that you are paying off something that, had you not, would only accrued more debt and more expense later down the line. So the other bit of good news is that
your business started or get it really going where you're doing it yourself. It's a good lesson, isn't it, Jeff, to train yourself not to live personally beyond your means, because you're going to have to make sure you don't do that in your business too.
Yeah, it's unfortunately very un-American not to live beyond your means, but
not anymore. Not anymore. Today, right here, me and you, and whoever else is out there saying it. I mean, I say it all the time. It's people. I guess the media and whatever debt people are selling don't want us to think it's American. But and you remember the commercial, Jeff, where the guy on the riding mower comes out and he's got a wife and 2 kids, and he's riding his mower around. I've got a pool, I've got a country club membership, I'm mowing my big lawn in my 5-bedroom house, and he says, how do I do it all? Then he smiles and goes, with this dazed look on his face, I'm up to debt in my eyeballs. I'm up to my eyeballs in debt. And
I remember the commercial. He says, somebody help me, please.
Yeah,
something to that effect.
Exactly. I can't remember what it was a commercial for, probably not a credit card company, but it's just interesting how we get all these mixed messages, and one of the messages in your book is that you have to look at your life and determine what's best for you and really make some sound business decisions and forget the riding mower if you can't pay for it.
Well, the other thing, too, is especially going back to our parents and grandparents, where certain things that you had were trappings of success, if you will. The big house, the nice car, the country club membership, the kids in good private schools, all that sort of thing. And I think implicitly in a lot of our minds these days, I think I'm as guilty of this as anyone, you feel as though I'm not measuring up if indeed I don't have all those little trinkets and all those little trappings of success that 20, 30 years ago were absolutely dead rock barometers of success in America. And I think a lot of people happily are revisiting that idea to the point of saying, happiness and success can come in other fashions. It just doesn't necessarily mean I have to buy the $75,000 car to prove the point.
Well, and how many people do you know, and I know some personally, who are today trying to find someone to buy their Hummer because they can't put gas in it anymore?
Yes, I know someone, and it's like trying to market tomatoes that have salmonella in them. They're having about as much success.
Really
so
good sound principles here. Good stuff here in this book, and I love that. Even though there's a lot of news that is sobering. It's definitely sobering. It doesn't have to be scary, and I love that one of the things that's coming out of this show is, Jeff, the 3 things that you said we can all do. Every week, automatically deposit some money someplace where we can't touch it. take a look at long-term care as soon as you can, and also disability. And if you have those three things in place, if something happens to you and you can't work, you're not broke. If nothing happens to you and you can work, forever until you're, 1 foot in the grave and you're just happily running your business, if you're saving automatically every week, then you're not going to get to the point where you don't have anything.
Right. Again, too, the more automatic and the more thought, if you take yourself out of the equation, if you will, for savings, the better you'll be.
Good. Now, Jeff, I got to ask this question. Another sobering issue that we need to talk about that's on everyone's minds, and that is the question of health insurance. When you're out here on your own, it's not prohibitive, I guess, depending on where you are, but, what are some of the best options for people who, want to make sure that they've got some kind of coverage, not just the long-term, the disability coverage, but, if they slip on the ice and break their leg?
Right. Again, there's some good news here. First of all, you can't reinforce enough the importance of finding some kind of health care coverage. Don't try to roll the dice and say, let's hope we don't get sick, let's hope nobody gets hurt, let's hope nobody gets ill, no health care insurance. Don't do that, because that's a fool's bet. Get some health care insurance in some capacity. There are a number of programs that are basically catastrophic insurance. Granted, if you go to the doctor for sniffles, it won't cover that. But if something of fairly significant import happens, these kinds of programs that are fairly affordable will protect you. The general rule of thumb I have found is to basically buy the most comprehensive health care you can, or health care insurance that you can. And again, too, that's kind of a mercurial idea, because, with the rising premiums for decent health care coverage, a lot of people can't afford something or what they think is pretty adequate. So, but there are some other alternatives. First of all, look at your deductibles when you're buying your health care coverage. Up your deductibles, and the less you're going to pay per premium. Granted, if something happens, the greater the deductible you're going to have to meet, but it does sort of mitigate the upfront premium expense of the health care coverage. The other option is to look into alternative sources of health care coverage, because there are all sorts of groups and organizations that provide health care insurance or health care options or programs for their members. Professional groups, such, for instance, one thing I have, the American Society of Journalists and Authors, they have a health care program, which is part of a group, which they buy into another group, and it's fairly affordable. Ask your alumni association at the college or university you attended. A lot of them have health care coverage options for their members. Investigate every group, every association to which you may be a member. Any group like that, a lot of them are offering health care insurance for their members. Again, it might not be particularly comprehensive, but it's something, that you can access and have some kind of coverage. The last real quick tip I would offer, too, is if you do find something that's of lesser expense, it comes back to the importance of savings. Okay, if you're meeting a certain premium and you're paying a very modest amount in premium coverage, set aside whatever you might be saving in a savings account or something like that. So if by chance you do have to access the coverage and you do have a high deductible, you've been setting aside money to meet that deductible all along. So it's not this crippling upfront expense when you have to actually use the coverage. So go cheap, save the difference, and above all, have some kind of health care coverage at all, because if you don't, you're basically playing Russian roulette, and that one cylinder with the bullet's going to come up sooner or later.
Right. And you have a chapter in your book on this, too.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, about ways to shop for affordable health care coverage, for retirees, for business owners. Again, too, for business owners, check out your professional associations. They're really good.
I never thought of the Alumni Association at the college or university. That's a really good tip.
Yep. Oh, my college, I know, has an alumni health care program. I fortunately was able to find a better one, but still, it's an option that a lot of people might investigate. And I think that particularly for the larger the university and the larger the alumni population, the better the deal you can get, because, again, by sheer numbers, they can negotiate better packages than perhaps smaller schools can.
Right. Great tip, and one that I bet a lot of people didn't think about. Jeff, where can we go to find out more about your book? And, well, you've got more than one book. Your books, your activities, your speaking. What's your website, and tell us what's new with you these days before we close out.
Okay. At this point, for the books, they are all listed on Amazon.com, so you can go and find them there. My website at the moment is down, but if you Google Jeff Wuorio, you'll see a number of hits that will delineate what I've been doing lately. I have
linked to your blog too.
Oh yes, I am blogspot.com. Jeff Wuorio is the location of my blog.
Great. Okay.
And if people get good housekeeping, I have one of the lead stories out this month on couples who have worked out family financial issues, and I also have the leading story in the September issue for good housekeeping on ways to fight back against the recession. A story coming out in Ladies' Home Journal in a couple of months on ways to find cheap gas. And I'm also involved in a new partnership with my colleague Ramon Ray, where we are speaking to businesses of all sorts via webinars, seminars, personal appearances, annual meetings, what have you, where in effect we are offering a balance between technology and the human element for business success. For instance, if you update your information technology, Ramon takes the technical side. I'll talk about the benefits in terms of retention, happier, more productive employees, better recruiting, things like that.
What website can we go to for more information about that?
Again, the blog spot will also have some information about that as well.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, this has been such an education, a refresher for some people, and maybe even the beginning of a new look at their finances and their future for others. Jeff Wuorio, author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Retirement Planning, thank you so much for joining today. It's been great to have you as my guest. I've got some great shows coming up, guys. I want you to go to www.indiebusinessradio.com and take a look at some of the really wonderful guests that I've got coming up for you over the next several weeks. We've got someone to talk about the importance of having a white paper for your business. Have you ever thought about having a white paper? We have got the white paper man himself here coming up later on this summer. We've got a great guest who's going to talk about the new rules of marketing and PR. We've got another guest who's going to talk about marketing to the social web and making sure that your presence is felt in the social media landscape on the Internet. Just a host of guests to help you grow your business right here on Indie Business Radio. I invite you to join the discussion, too, at indiebusinessblog.com. I'll see you next week for another exciting edition of Indie Business Radio. In the meantime, enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way.
You're listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com.